to episode 13 of the Double Down podcast presented by WaterWave. Today is Friday, December 16th, and I'm excited to be joined in the studio with a special guest. But before we get to that amazing interview, we need to hit the Double Down weekly wrap-up. So for the weekly wrap-up, I mentioned to you guys last week about just dealing with some knee pain post-surgery. Some of the things that people don't really understand through an ACL and lateral and medial meniscus surgery is obviously the knee's going to hurt, but you're going to have other things like your hamstring, like your quad, like your calf, like your hip. It's going to kind of flare up, and it's going to kind of, just cause you discomfort. It comes with growing the muscle back and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of what I've been dealing with in terms of my rehab, and that means a lot of dry needling. For those of you that haven't done dry needling before, basically what our trainer does, he puts a needle about 3-4 inches into my hip, into my quad, into my hamstring, kind of just to loosen up some muscle, get the muscle working again. Just trying to basically relieve some of the pressure that I've been feeling in my hip. Like I mentioned before, it's nothing too major, but it's something we definitely want to stay on top of, so I can keep getting in the weight room and keep getting stronger in terms of my knee. Next for the weekly wrap up, we're gonna hit some Gopher basketball news. Like I mentioned last week, we're kind of in a little bit of a slum right now. Just lost a couple games in a row, and we're just looking to bounce back. As I mentioned before, we pre-record episodes. So today is actually Wednesday, and then we play tonight versus Arkansas Pine Bluff. So hopefully we got to see you guys at the game. Hopefully a lot of you came to the game, spent time to get down to the barn and check us out. And lastly, not a whole lot of news this week, but it's Christmas time. It's getting into Christmas time, so just enjoying the weather. Semester is ending up, so we've actually had some pretty nice weather here in Minnesota. For all my non-Minnesota listeners, it's been mid-30s all week, which is not very normal for us. So definitely something to note. Definitely something we want to mention. But that's all I have for this week's Double Down weekly wrap-up. And stick with us as we're going to head to our featured interview. Today I'm excited to be joined in the studio with this year's Big Ten Volleyball Player of the Year, Taylor Landfair. Taylor, thank you for joining me today. Thanks for coming on the pod. I've spent a lot of time coming to games this year and just watching you guys. From a team standpoint, you guys are just such a fun team to watch. Such a fun team. Just your camaraderie. I think volleyball is really unique in that way too, where it's like you have such a fun camaraderie within the team, and it's enjoyable to watch. And I think it's almost inspirational to some other teams. It's like to see the way you guys interact with one another, and it's always so positive and so uplifting. It's definitely a special thing. I bet volleyball has been a part of your life for a long time. I saw you grew up with 3 siblings. I'm sure you were always active in sports. When did you kind of realize that volleyball was what you want to do? Volleyball is something I can make a career out of. Was it at a really young age, or was it kind of going into high school? How did that kind of process go about for you?
So when I first started off with all these kind of different sports, I did dance, I did cheer, soccer, basically all the sports you kind of could think of.
Yeah.
And so then I really kind of sold with, first of all, I did cheer for a really long time. Okay. I really loved cheer, but then of course I got a little bit too tall for that. And then I did basketball just because my dad coached basketball. And then I was also, of course, tall. So then he was like, well, let's try basketball, kind of see. Exactly. Yeah. And then he also played basketball. So then he kind of was my coach for a little bit. But then after I realized, I was like, I don't really like the contact. I don't really like people pushing me around, touching me, and that's not really my vibe. So then I was like, okay, well, what kind of sport can I do next that's also really good for tall people? And so my mom played volleyball all throughout high school, and then she wanted to play in college, but she chose track instead.
Gotcha.
And so she's like, okay, well, let me just try and introduce you to volleyball, kind of give you the fundamentals, and then see if you kind of like it. And if you don't, that's fine, but let's just see if you do. And then I started in 5th grade with her, and that's when I started volleyball, and I loved it.
Yeah, so you probably fell in love right away, realized it was something you kind of wanted to do.
Yeah.
How did that, because I know it's different for girls and guys with high school kind of recruiting process. When did you kind of start getting recruited for volleyball? When did you know you were legit, going to be able to basically pick where you wanted to go to college to play volleyball? How did that kind of go down for you when you probably into high school, or was it even younger than that?
I got recruited in 7th grade.
Jeez.
So I started getting letters in 7th grade.
Wow.
But my mom didn't really let me look at those letters because she was like, you need to focus on volleyball, especially because you only started a year ago. So she's like, okay, let's just focus on volleyball. I'll read the letters. And then she's like, when you actually get to be in 9th grade, then you can kind of get more involved into your recruiting process. So then during 9th grade, I got more involved.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I mean, it's a fun time too, but I think that's a cool thing that your mom did, because it's like, hey, let's get through middle school, let's focus on school, and then we'll pick from there, which is unique. Yeah. you get into high school, get into ninth grade. Obviously, you're on track to be a pretty good high school volleyball player. When did Minnesota reach out? When did you kind of start forming that connection with Minnesota, and then ultimately you picked to come to the University of Minnesota? Take us through that kind of process and your decision making, and why you decided to come north and be a Gopher.
So in ninth grade, I kind of started looking at more of the top schools within the Big Ten. So I was looking at, for sure, Wisconsin, Nebraska, and then here.
Yeah.
And so then I went on a visit in ninth grade to each place over the summer. And then I also did the camps with each school.
Okay.
And so what really stood out to me about Minnesota was the camp, especially because he really wanted to form a relationship with me, even though I was only in ninth grade. It just felt like he really wanted to form that connection with me kind of right off the bat, even before I did, if I chose to come here. And then also after that, I really didn't like the other schools technically, just because like it really wasn't that team feel, and I also feel like the coaches really didn't want to involve me into the process as much as Hugh did.
Yeah.
And so then I took 3 visits actually to each school, just like kind of finalized that I really wanted to come here. And then my junior year is when I was here on my last visit, and out of nowhere I was just like, I think I want to come here. So me and my mom that night before, because we were going to leave that next morning, and we came up with like a pros and cons list, and then that next morning I was like, I want to come here, and then I committed.
Yeah, that's special. I think
Thanks.
it's such a unique thing too, where you kind of knew even from the jump, going to camps, you knew, and we could throw a little Wisconsin shade because we're not Wisconsin fans on this podcast, but no, it's I think it's a special thing when you go somewhere and you're like, this is kind of the spot for me, and I'm sure you started forming, after you commit, you started forming relationships with some of the girls coming in, girls on the team, and it's like that kind of that family atmosphere. I think is so special, especially when you're trying to pick where you want to go to college. I was talking to one of the basketball players I trained growing up, and he's kind of in his process right now of trying to pick, and I'm like, dude, go somewhere that like makes you feel welcome. Go somewhere that wants you, makes you feel fit, and it's
exactly.
I think that's such a special thing. You had such a illustrious high school career. You're ranked as the #1 prospect in the country. You're Under Armour first team All-American, and you just have a great career. So you're playing at a very high level of volleyball. How did that help prepare you for the Big Ten? Obviously the Big Ten is the best volleyball league in the country. How did your high school career and your club level kind of just prepare you to get ready for, what is really good volleyball in the Big Ten?
So I think it was really helpful because my high school coach was also a coach at my club.
Oh, wow.
And so kind of first when I started in 6th grade, I actually went to one of the high school camps just to kind of get into like the mix of like what high school volleyball would look like, all that kind of stuff. And so he's like, well, I actually coach at this specific club, and I think it's the best club within this whole entire area.
Oh, wow.
So I think it'd be really cool if you maybe came out there, and maybe I can do a lesson with you, or you can come to our tryouts or something kind of around those lines. And so then I was like, okay, let me just talk to my mom about it. So my mom kind of got in contact with him, and then we got into contact to the director of my club. And so then after that, I was kind of just like a tumble effect where I did high school with him, and then I also did club afterwards. And I think it like really prepared me. So
yeah, that's a unique story too, because I don't think a lot of times, me personally, you have different coaches for high school and club and that kind of stuff,
exactly.
and sometimes they butt heads even too and stuff, but it made that kind of seamless for you. You come in and you early enroll, correct? You ended up coming to Minnesota early. Kind of take us through like expectations you have coming into Minnesota. Obviously you have confidence in your game, you're a good player, but this is another level. Obviously you've played on USA Volleyball, you've played on a world stage, but girls are taller, girls are faster, girls are stronger. How did you kind of take those expectations into Minnesota, and how did they kind of form in that first year where it's like you're supposed to be a senior in high school still?
Right. So when I first came here, I was really confident because I did the All-American thing. I did like a whole high school, and I was really good in high school, whatever. That kind of like held up for me, I guess. And so when I came here, and everybody was a lot taller than me, like you said, they were a lot stronger, and I was like, whoa, like I don't know necessarily if I can fit in right now. And so kind of like that whole process of like, I guess, like undermining myself and just kind of like not having all that confidence that I had before in high school, which was really hard. And so I always had to talk to the upperclassmen, especially like Adana and Stephanie, and just letting them know that like, hey, I'm struggling in this kind of moment, and like, what can you do to help me out? And they were really helpful with me, just because like it was just a really hard process for me, and especially because like I wasn't getting as many kills, and I wasn't doing like great with passing and all that kind of stuff, and so it was just really hard at that time. Well,
that's such a unique thing too, where it's like I don't think a lot of freshmen are able to even admit that coming in, where it's like, oh, I was a 5-star, I was a 4-star, like I was tough, like I'm gonna be tough, but like it's okay to be like, okay, this is tougher, this is like, and reach out to upperclassmen like, hey, how do I get through this? Obviously Steph Samity is a great resource for you. She was Big Ten Player of the Year as well, so it's like you coming in and it's not like you're lost, you have these resources. It's like, don't be afraid to use them, and I think that's something that younger kids and lower classmen need to know coming into college, where it's like, dude, it's like, it's okay to not know, but ask and then work to get better and fix that kind of thing. And it works for you. You come in and in the 2021 spring season, you have a great year. Freshman, all Big Ten team, 2-time Big Ten Freshman of the Week. You had 20 kills in a game against Maryland. You're getting these kills back. You're coming back, and you're that player that you knew you were. But there was no fans, right? COVID hindered fans.
Yeah.
Kind of take us through, because I don't think we really tapped into on the podcast the real difference. Because you're coming to Minnesota, right? You're coming to the PAV, the best place to play college basketball. I mean, college volleyball. How did no fans kind of hinder just like the atmosphere of play and for you and your teammates?
I think it was weird because in practice we would kind of put over the audio like the sound of a crowd, trying to just simulate that, but it just wasn't anything in comparison. And so when we actually got to matches, it was just weird because we had to be the ones that kind of generated all the energy, and we really couldn't feed off of anything except for ourselves, which was hard just because it was kind of like it was a neutral site for both teams, and you really couldn't feed anything. And so I think that just kind of prepared us for the future, just because this helped us build so much energy, and then we can also bring even more energy now. And then also when it comes time to actually play with fans, then it's just easier. Yeah,
it's just second nature, and I think that's such a unique thing too. And I think it's like I mentioned before in volleyball, it's you guys create your own energy. Especially when you go on the road and you got to play at Nebraska or you got to play at Wisconsin. Like, it's not like there's a couple thousand, like there's 15,000 people there, and it's like nobody wants you to win if you're in the Kohl Center and you're playing Wisconsin. So it's like you have to create that own energy. You have to be able to trust the person to your next, because maybe you can't even hear them. It's such a big thing. And we talked about adjustments. For you, what would you say kind of was your biggest adjustment from high school to that freshman year of volleyball, for you as a player? Because obviously you don't want to change who you are, you want to stick to your game, but what kind of adjustments did you have to make that you kind of realized maybe like throughout the season, like, hey, this is what I need to do, maybe I need to fix this, fix that? How did you kind of adjust as a freshman?
So I think the way that my club taught us, they taught us more of the Japanese type of way when it comes to volleyball. Okay. But then when I came here, we taught more of the USA way. Yeah. And so it just kind of is different technique, like where your leg is when you pass or where your arm is when you hit and stuff like that. And so I really had to make those changes and just take that as a learning experience, rather than thinking like, oh, I'm this player, like I was all this kind of in high school, so I don't really need to make any changes. But instead embrace those changes because my coaches are here telling me what they need me to do, because I can be like this person in the future, and I can like make those changes because they are inefficiencies is what we call them. And so when I change these, I can kind of be more of like that pro player in the future.
Yeah, I think that's such a unique thing, especially with a coach like Hugh, who's obviously knows the game really well, because coached it for a long time, and it's like the kind of system you want to run, and it only works if everybody gets on board. So it's like, I think it's something that we're kind of dealing with too, and I think a lot of teams deal with it. It's like you got to have everybody on board to the kind of plan that you have, and it worked out for you. You had an awesome freshman year. You were All-American, honorable mention, and you end that season and you head into your sophomore year after a great freshman year. Like, where is your head at in terms of volleyball? Like, how excited are you to hopefully play in front of fans? Where are you going? Obviously you had a great year, you want to have another great year. What kind of mindset did you take into your sophomore year?
I think I really just embraced the fact that, like, one, we could have fans, but then also two, really fans couldn't see what we had. Yeah. And I feel like they really couldn't see, like, beyond a screen of, like, the amount of work that we put in and the amount of energy that we had and the amount of chemistry that we were building. And I just feel like we kind of just all took that into consideration and be like, hey, like, this is what we can do. Like, these are our goals. This is our standard. And we need to make sure that we're met with our standard and making sure that everybody's on the same exact plate, just like you said.
Yeah, no, and it's such a unique thing where it's like you're allowing people to come back and play an extra year. And it's an exciting thing, especially for a team like Minnesota who has so much depth, who every year is going to bring in a freshman who's, obviously a legit player, So you head into that year and you guys opened up with Texas at home, right? I think, yeah. And I was at that game. I was like, because this is my first time at the U, first year, and I was like, dude, I've been watching Minnesota volleyball. Like, I obviously know the excitement that comes with the PAV. Like, I was there an hour early in the front row, like excited to watch you guys. Kind of just take us through, like, you probably got chills running up there. You probably heard the fans before it even started. Take us through, like, the excitement it is to play in the PAV and, like, how cool it is to, like, have people come out and, like, really support you and, like, watch and love watching you do what you do.
So kind of like our whole, like, pregame ritual is, like, where we stand inside the locker room, and then we give each other like high fives, and then we kind of just do like a Minnesota shout, and then like normally I really didn't have this experience of like what it is hearing those fans when you're actually standing in the locker room. And so I was just standing in the locker room and I was like, whoa, like I can hear every single sound. It was like the coolest thing I've actually ever experienced in my life. And so then we were actually able to break, and then we went out there. I kind of just was like, whoa. I was just looking around. Everybody was up on their feet. You could see maroon and gold, it was a sea of maroon and gold. And it was just so cool just because I've never been able to experience that before. And so just being there with my teammates, and we were just like, we need to like show exactly what these fans have been missing all throughout these 2 years. And so it was, I don't know. I just like gave me chills.
No doubt.
Thinking about it, I was just like, it's crazy.
No, and I think that's such a unique thing where it's like, it's such a cool thing in college because it's like, it's okay to take a step and just kind of look around and be like, dang, like, you know, I worked for this, you know, I earned this. There's a reason why I'm here. And you go into that Texas game, which was, you know, a phenomenal match with Texas. You guys had them on the ropes a couple times actually, and it was just a fun game. The energy in there was live, and you kind of have a little pain that game. Kind of just take us through just that game before we kind of dive deeper into what happened, just playing in that Texas game and the kind of pain you felt as you were playing in the game.
So when I first started in the first set, I was feeling good, like really pumped about it, really excited, and I knew that kind of like 2 weeks prior, I did hurt that part of my body a little bit, but I kind of just pushed it to the side because I was thinking, oh, this is probably just me being sore, or I might have did something that just tweaked it a little bit, but it will go away at some point. But then during the second set, I was like, oh, it kind of feels weird because I keep stretching it, over-rotating it a little bit, but I was like, I'll be fine until the game's over.
Gotcha.
So in this third set, I was like, okay, well, this kind of hurts a lot, and I was really feeling it a lot more in that time, but I was just like, I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to fight through because this game will almost be over anyways. It's not like I'll be playing for like another day and a half, whatever.
Yeah.
So then during the fourth set, I remember this one specific point, and I went up to hit, and I came down, and I just over-rotated way too much just because the set was a little bit too far behind my head, and like the whole entire thing, I just felt it stretch.
Yeah.
And I just kind of felt like it tore just a little bit, but not too crazy.
Yeah.
And so then I just looked over at my trainer, and she's like, you're done. And I was like, oh. So then I had to go to the sideline, and I had to sub out, and I was so upset about it. And so I went to the locker room with her into the training area, and I just sat on the table, and I just didn't really have any words because I was like, we literally could have won that game. Like, not necessarily saying that this game is on me, but at the same time, like, I was thinking if I would have said something those 2 weeks before and letting her know that I actually was kind of feeling that pain, then maybe this wouldn't happen, and maybe we could have taken another set off Texas and came up with the win in the fifth set. So there were just a lot of emotions I was kind of going through my head, and it was just kind of a lot of negativity, but also at the same time, I was like, I just don't really know what this looks like for me in the future.
Yeah, and it's such a tough thing, too, with a person that has the level of experience and the level of competitive nature that you have. You know, it's like you don't want to be taken out. Like, you know something's wrong, but it's like you would have to drag me out because I don't want to be taken out. Like, I want to be out there helping my team win. And you talked about those emotions. Let's kind of go into that. Obviously, you knew you were kind of injured. Something was wrong. You know, obviously there's probably a lot of pain. Other than the physical kind of pain and emotions you went through, what kind of other emotions just like popped up initially? Like, what were you thinking in terms of the year, in terms of the moment? Like, were you able to kind of rationalize those emotions? Well, there's a game going on like 30 feet away from you.
Right. So I think like right when I came off, I was kind of just trying to be a little bit more optimistic and a little bit on the positive side, and kind of telling myself like, oh, this is just gonna pass. You're fine. Don't even worry about it. Like we can go on to the next match. You're good. But then at the same time, I was thinking in my head, I was like, well, what if I'm not good? Or what if I can't go to the next game? Or what if I have to stop for the whole entire season? Kind of what does that look like? And so I was kind of explaining those emotions to my trainer, but she's like, don't even worry about that. Like, we're not worrying about that right now. What we're worrying about right now is just instead making sure that you can actually go back on the sideline, maybe go in if you really feel like you could, but just making sure that you're out there supporting your teammates. And so I kind of feel like that really helped me in that moment, just to kind of not keep going down on myself even more than I already was. And so I feel like after kind of like that game was over, then all the emotions kind of started pouring out again. But I feel like in the moment, she kind of like just kept me level-headed. Yeah,
well, it's such a tough thing too, especially when we're so competitive as athletes, and like we don't want to sit out. Like, we want to be in the game, you know, especially because we've worked so hard for it. And you know, you get through that Texas game, and I think if I read it correctly, it was in the Michigan game, which was, you know, after the Iowa State game and before the Maryland game, and that was the kind of game where you played. I think you played a half a set, and you kind of explained it to us what happened in terms of like the physical, like actual play of the injury. But yeah, the Michigan game, half of a set. Kind of just take us through that and the kind of pain you felt and what happened.
So in practice that morning, I was thinking, okay, my ab doesn't really hurt that much. I'll be good for the game. And if I do need to say anything about my ab hurting, I'll say something.
Yeah.
But I was like, in the moment, I really don't want to try and like push myself. And I want to make sure that my technique is good so I can limit the amount of pain that I have. So then during that set, in the beginning, I was feeling really good. I went up and I took a line shot, and I was like, oh, that felt really good.
Yeah.
I think I'll be good for the rest of the set and for the rest of the game. And then I remember after kind of going through the front row, I was thinking I was good, but then I came back into the back row, and then the first rotation I had for the front row again is when I basically went up and I over-rotated, and I kind of felt my ab actually tear in that moment, which was awful. And then I hit the ball like way out of bounds. It was really, really bad. And then I looked at my trainer and I was like, I need to be taken out, because I knew in that moment I basically tore it. And then I got subbed out and I sat on the sideline, and I was just like, I was pushing my body weight all the way back because I was just trying to stretch it because it hurt so bad to breathe. And so in that moment I was just like, I think I'm done.
Yeah,
so,
almost like you kind of know right away. And I think it's such a unique thing where it's like you want to be out there. You actually had 8 kills in that game, and so it's like you're showing your teammates, you're showing your trainer, you're like, I want to be out there, like I want to fight through what's going on, but at the same time it hurts. Eventually you go into the doctors and they tell you have an abdominal tear and you're going to have to be out the rest of the season. We talk a lot about in this podcast just like initial emotions, the human nature of just like the grieving process. How did that kind of take about for you? Where'd your head go right away? How like what kind of emotions were you feeling when you got told that you're gonna have to sit out for the rest of the year? So
at first I was really scared just because I was thinking, well, if I have to sit out now, what does that mean for me in the future? And can this injury actually like get solved at some point so I can actually be able to play the next year or whenever that time may be? And so after I kind of felt those emotions, then I was kind of thinking, well, maybe what if I would have said something 2 weeks before when I actually felt that pain? Like, this is my fault. I'm doing everything wrong. Like, I could have stopped this whole entire thing from happening. So that was kind of a really hard headspace to kind of be in. And so then after that, I was talking to my trainer, and she's like, you're going to be fine. Like, we've had injuries like this before, and they have been worse than yours before. So that kind of was a little bit of a positive note for me, just because I was thinking, okay, well, then if I really work on my rehab and I really get back into the gym and kind of do all these little things that will help me kind of be best when the best is needed for me, then I was like, okay, well, then maybe this injury is kind of something that is good, and I think that everything happens for a reason, and I do think that injury happened for a reason for me. Yeah, and
it's such a unique thing where it's like it's cool to hear, and this is why I do the podcast as well, is it's cool to hear that other athletes are going through injuries. Other athletes are going through things that keep them sidelined, and it's like they've gotten through it and they've gotten back and better, and it's like it's possible. You talked about your mental headspace not being in a great mental headspace. What are some things that you personally did to just mentally stay locked in on rehab, mentally stay locked in as a good teammate? Because I think if you let things take control of you, they are going to take control of you, and they'll always win. So where did you go mentally to just stay level-headed through the rehab process?
I think my teammates were a really big part in that, just because they were always checking up on me every single day. They were asking me, hey, how are you feeling this day? Like, what have you been doing to help yourself kind of get back to where you need to be? So I feel like that really helped me a lot. But then also my coaches were full support of me being able to redshirt, and they were also in full support of me making sure that I take the time that I need in order for me to get back. So I never felt pushed, because I feel like maybe other places, like, you could feel pushed whenever you get injured, and then just like be like, you need to come back right now because we need you. But I never felt that, and I feel like that really helped me just because I was in such a negative headspace. And I feel like there was this one day where I was sitting in the office with Ronnie, our trainer, and I just like started breaking down, and I was like, I'm not gonna be back. Like, there's no way. This hurts so bad. I feel like the rehab is not working as much as it should be. The medicine I'm taking is not working. And she's like, calm down. Like, you just need to take a second, breathe. Like, throughout that whole entire process, like, I didn't shed a tear once, and that was the first time I actually shed a tear. And I was like, I think I'll be fine after I talked to her, because like, I don't even know. In that headspace, I was just, it was so negative. It was so bad. Yeah,
and it's unique because I went through the same thing. Second ACL, I remember I was just sitting on our trainer's table, and I was trying to bend my knee, and I couldn't bend my knee. And my trainer looked at me, Ryan, he's like, you good? And I was just like, boom, went right head down and just started bawling. I was like, I can't control this. And I think that's okay. I think that grieving process is okay, and it allows you to kind of like see through. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but what did that kind of like process of being vulnerable and like allowing emotions to flow out, how did that like lead you through the rest of rehab? Because I think it does, if I'm not wrong.
So for me, I'm not very an emotional person. I don't really like sharing my emotions with people just because it's, I don't know, like in my head, I'm just like, it's my emotions. So like I should be taking on my own emotions. But I feel like in that space, it was just good for me just because I don't really do that kind of stuff unless it's with my mom. And so I feel like that really bonded my relationship with my athletic trainer. And I knew from that point on, I could be vulnerable with her and I could share to her what kind of emotions were I was going through, the kind of like whatever day it was. And I feel like that really helped me throughout the process, just because like if I did feel something slightly, maybe if I was able to actually pass that practice and I felt something, she's like, okay, well, tell me. And so I actually did feel like I can tell her. And then from that point on, I feel like our connection was really high. And I feel like every single day I kind of came in excited to kind of get better, which was really positive, just because before I was just like, I don't want to play volleyball. Like I don't want to come in. I don't really want to do these kind of things, because to me, in my head, when I was in that negative space, it was like, there's really no point because I can't play for the rest of the season.
Yeah, well, I think also when you get into that negative place, you don't see the bigger picture. You know, you don't see the finish line. You see, damn, I gotta wake up. I gotta do this. I gotta go to school. I gotta watch practice. Like it can beat at you, and it can defeat you mentally. You know, you talk about your teammates in your family and kind of being one in terms of like, you know, being a support system. How did that help not only you kind of, you know, get back mentally, but how did that help the team, you know, in terms of their success throughout the season? Because I'm sure you saw just the way they played and the way they supported you and the family atmosphere you have, like they're going to have more success because of how close you guys are. Kind of talk about that.
So for me, I really took this whole experience as like a learning experience and a time for me to be the best teammate I could, especially because I physically could not go out on the court. So I really not necessarily had no choice, but I feel like it was like more of my role, and I feel like each person kind of needs to know their role, and that was my role in that moment in time. And so every single game, I was excited, pumped up to be on the sideline, making sure that I'm screaming my head off, letting my teammates know that I'm there with them, and giving them as much energy as I can, because I know that's what helps us along the way, is like energy all the time. And I feel like my teammates really showed me that I'm really helping them out there, and I thought that was really good, just because I was just like, well, what is my kind of new role? And I know I could be a really good team, and I know I'm supposed to be cheering my head off, but is that actually helping my teammates? And they would always tell me after the game, they're like, we could hear you. Like, you're giving us so much energy. You're doing so much for us. And then also my coaches would let me know. So that was super positive, because it was like, I am here for a reason, and I am doing something that's actually beneficial. And I know that I can't actually play volleyball physically, but I know that I can be with my teammates mentally. Yeah,
and it's such a unique thing about college sports too, and I think it's the reason why you come to Minnesota. It's the reason why you pick where you want to go. It's like this. If you have that family atmosphere, it makes the practices, the tough practices, so much easier. You know, it makes the dog days so much better when you're doing it with people that you really care about too. And I think that's such a cool thing. Talk about finishing up rehab. You know, you're coming into the end of rehab. When did that kind of process go? When did you kind of start feeling better? And, you know, what plans did you have for yourself? Because I think a lot of times we've talked about with athletes on the podcast, it's like, you know, you want to get back to where you were, if not better. Did you have that mindset, or was it kind of like, I'm just going to keep inching along? Or how did you kind of, you know, flip that mindset when you were back on the court again? It's like, I'm going to be a beast again, and everybody's going to see how good I am, you know?
So I think when I went home in December, was kind of where the time of like my healing process is, where I actually started feeling a little bit more better, and where I could actually go to practice and maybe I could take a few swings. And so then in the spring, when I came back after that break, I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. These are my goals that I'm going to set for myself. And then I also talked to my coaches, and I was like, this is where I think I can be, and can you be the ones that would help me kind of get to that step? And so I feel like right when I came back, I was like, this is my time. Like, I've had enough time sitting out. I'm not going to be sitting out any longer. Like, I'm going to take my rehab super seriously, and I'm going to make sure that I warm up my ab every single day. I'm going to use ice. I'm going to use heat. I'm going to use every single little thing that I need to make sure that I am able to be at 100%, and I just took that and I ran with it.
Yeah, and I think it's such a unique thing when you can have that trust in your coach, where it's like, hey, this is where I'm at. This is where I want to get. Like, are you on the same page as me? How can we get there? And, you know, it worked for you. You know, you open up the 2022 season against Baylor. You have 15 kills to open up that one. Take us through just playing again. You know, we talk about obviously the emotions that you go through with injury, the emotions of not being able to play, but there's also a lot of emotions when it's like, I'm back on the court. Take us through that first game against Baylor and just how it felt to be back out there on the court again.
I think it was amazing. I just took it as like a huge step back. I kind of just like stepped back when I really got out there, because I was like, this is my time to shine, and I've worked this hard, especially throughout the entire spring and summer, to be able to make sure that I am back at 100%, and I felt 100%, which was really cool. And so when I just first took those first 2 swings, I was like this is me, like I'm back, and I felt that was super cool. My teammates were hyping me up. They were letting me know that they're there with me, and that like this injury is not necessarily in the past, but it kind of is in the past, just because I'm not going to be able to feel this injury again, I don't believe. And so it was just an amazing experience, honestly.
And that feeling of overcoming something. Obviously you can overcome many different things throughout a season, adversity and that kind of thing, but especially when it's something that sidelines you for so long, and it's like there's doubts, doubts creep in. I'm sure you had the same thing, and I've felt it too. It's like, am I going to be the same player? Will I be able to do the same thing? And you kind of prove it to yourself that you are. You're named MVP of that Big 10, Big 12 challenge. You're finding your step back again. You're finding your swag. Take us through the Big 10 schedule. Tell us, everybody, what it's like to not really have a night off, to go play Ohio State and then Nebraska and then Wisconsin, like the grueling process that it takes to win games in the Big 10.
So I think it's really hard, honestly, just because I feel like now every single team that we play is really good regardless of who they are. And they're going to bring their best game to the table, and we don't really have time to kind of doubt a team or kind of set an expectation for that team. And we can't really say like, oh, we're going to beat this team in 3 because of their record maybe last year or maybe 2 years ago. That's just not a thing anymore. And I think that we need to make sure that we all come into the game knowing exactly what our assignments are, and making sure that we know our scouting report to the T, and making sure that we put every single little technique that needs to get us to the win is actually in place. And I also think that we need to make sure we rely on our coaches, rely on each other, because every single game is really hard, and I feel like there's really not time for you to take any plays off. And I think that there's always a time for us to get better, and there's always a time for us to maybe implement this kind of technique or maybe do this change. And I think that you really have to be able to change really fast on the fly. And if your coach gives you information, you need to apply it right then and there, because if you don't, the other team's going to adjust, and then the likelihood of us winning that set is very slim. And
there's too much talent, especially in the Big 10. Just looking at the way your season shaped up, it's like teams are just bouncing all over the rankings. Then that's just the way it goes in the league. But you guys end the year really strong. You go 3-0 against Rutgers, you go 3-1 at Ohio State, and then you go 3-0 at Nebraska. Just a great way to end the season. I think, obviously you call Wisconsin your rival, but I think Nebraska's kind of up there too in terms of a rivalry. Take us through kind of just getting ready for the NCAA tournament, finishing up on a strong note. Where's everybody's mindset? Where's your mindset just going into the tournament and the goals you want to achieve? Because obviously, a national championship is everybody's goal. Take us through kind of the team atmosphere when it comes to getting ready for an NCAA tournament.
So I think that the way we ended our Big Ten play against Ohio State and then also Nebraska, I think that it put us really in a really good position to go into the tournament, because we have so much momentum, we have so much energy, and then we are on such a high from those 2 past wins. And so I think that when we actually came into the tournament, we all just sat down and was like, hey, this is what we want to do. This is what our goal is, and we set this goal in the beginning of the season, and we actually could achieve this at some point possibly. And so I feel like each person really took the time to like sit down with themselves and tell themselves like, this is what I need to do, and this is also what we need to do as a team. And I feel like we really took our scouting reports super seriously. In the gym, we were there every single day. Everybody was working hard. Everybody was making sure that their standards are where we all need to make sure that they're met. And I feel like everybody, like our whole vibe was really positive. And I think our whole team chemistry was also up there. And so I feel like it made it a little bit easier kind of going into the tournament, because I feel like in past years when I was here, it's kind of like a hectic and everybody's super nervous.
It comes quick.
Exactly. But I feel like this year was kind of more of a calming space, which is really positive. So.
And it's, I think especially when you have a good year and you're a 2 seed, you have expectations where it's like, you're supposed to make this, you're supposed to do that, and you got to take care of business at home right away. First of all, and you guys do that. You win your first 2 games to start out the tournament, and then you head down to Texas. Kind of just take us through that game against Ohio State. Obviously, you guys unfortunately lose that one, but just the excitement to play in the tournament and the excitement to just play more volleyball at a fun. It's just a fun venue, a fun place. It's like not everybody gets to be there. You're one of 16 teams. How did that process go for you guys, like the travel and all of that?
I think it was really cool. I think that all of us were super excited to go, because we did beat Ohio State a few games past, but then also they beat us early in the beginning of the semester. And so I think that, I don't know, it was just like how do I want to put it? it was just like a cool environment. I feel like everybody on the plane was super excited. We were all listening to music. We were all like talking with each other, and I just feel like our chemistry was super high. And then we actually got there, everybody was like, okay, let's go to bed, making sure that we wake up early just because our game was so early in the morning. And then we were also all looking at our scouting reports, and we all were just like, the whole entire vibe of the locker room when we got to Texas was just super cool. And I know we didn't really win, but I feel like regardless, I feel like after the loss, we were kind of just like, well, what can we do next year?
No, and I think that's the mindset you got to have. You know, our coach always talks about, and I've heard in the past, is like, it's okay to let yourself, you know, feel bad for a little bit, but once that's over, we always talk about, you get 12 to 24 hours, and then once that's over, it's like you got to move on. You got to move on to the next one. Talking about moving on, the University of Minnesota volleyball team just announced their new coach, Keegan Cook, this week. Do you have a relationship with Coach Cook? Have you met Coach Cook? I know this is kind of breaking kind of news, but what are your thoughts? New coach, how's that feeling?
I'm super excited. I think he's going to be a really good part of our team, just to kind of like give our team just a different look, or like a different coaching style, or something different that we haven't really seen in the past. And so I never had a relationship with him before, and so it was actually my first time meeting him and then actually talking to him. So I think he's a really cool guy, and I'm super excited to get into the gym with him.
It's super exciting. I think anytime you can have somebody bring in new tips and tricks, especially to a team that has so much talent already, and it's got to be exciting for him too. He gets to go in and coach the best team in the country. It's definitely exciting. Talk about this next year. Talk about what your plans are personally, what the team's plans are in terms of a new coach, because obviously it can take time to get used to a new coach, especially getting everybody on board. But what's the plan? What's go 2023 Go for Volleyball look like?
So I plan on staying because
let's go.
So I really want to stay just because I do want to give Coach Cook an opportunity to kind of like tell me what he sees that I can change, that maybe be different than like what other coaches have said in the past. And so I'm really excited just because I feel like he can take us to the next step. And I don't know, I'm just really excited for practice. I just can't wait.
How much of that decision to stay leans on like the teammates and the success that you've already had here? Because I think the way especially with football and basketball is going, if there's a new coach, you're going to enter the portal. That's just the way college athletics is kind of going. But you mentioned you want to stay. What kind of obviously you feel comfortable here in a system, and you got to bring a new person in, but what's like the biggest reasons why, like, hey, I want to stay and make a run for a national championship?
So I feel like with this team, we have so many amazing parts of it, and I feel like we can build upon what we already started last year. And I feel like this team is a team that can get to the national championship next year for sure. But then also I feel like I've made so many connections with people on the staff that are already here, like for example our athletic trainer, our strength coach, our video coach, like our assistant. Like there are so many people that I've already made all these connections with and these relationships with, and it'd be a little bit difficult for me to kind of start that whole process again. And I already like the school anyways, and I think that there's so much to do like off season, and when it comes to season we always have so much fun. And so I just think that me kind of jumping the gun before I actually am able to actually coach or be coached by Keegan, I think it just probably would put me at a disadvantage just because I've never actually experienced him as a coach. And so just giving him a semester I think would probably be in my best interest.
Yeah, and I think it shows recruits, it shows your teammates like, hey, if Taylor's on board, like why would we not be on board too? And it's I think that's the kind of leadership that you need from your best players. We talked about it a lot with former guests too. It's like when your best player is a leader, when your best player is the one that shows up every day to work, like the team follows that kind of stuff, and it's it's pretty cool to see. You talk about the future of the program, the future of yourself. Obviously you had a great year. You guys are aiming towards a national championship. As we wrap up, we like to wrap up each episode. The reason why I do this podcast is I want to inspire people to know that adversity comes and things come up, whether it's an injury, whether it's maybe a family matter, something happens in your life where adversity comes up, and you have to be able to look adversity in the face and get through it. Kind of just wrapping up, give us a little tip of advice, maybe something you learned from your rehab process that you would share with a younger version of yourself when it comes to facing adversity.
I think I would tell myself just be patient, and there's really no need kind of to push myself in order for me to be this kind of player. I feel like, and I think that me with this injury especially, it was good for me just to kind of take a step back because I really never had an injury like this that would make me sit out for so long. And so I think just taking it day by day, because there's no need to rush it, and especially since I did or I did have the opportunity to medically redshirt, I was just thinking, well, this is my time just to grow and develop and kind of be this better player that I do see myself to be in the future, especially in terms of leadership. But then also, I feel like my trajectory of my life is not going to be a linear line, and I think that there's always going to be ups and downs, and then just making sure that I embrace those ups and downs because they do set me up for success in the future anyways.
Yeah, no doubt. I think we've had a lot of guys and gals in the podcast that have mentioned, like, this thing is not a straight line. Like,
Right,
you don't get
exactly.
from point A to point B by walking down the street. Like, you got to go through highs and lows. You got to go through ebbs and flows to get where you want to get. I think that's all I got for this week. Taylor, we really appreciate you coming on the podcast, representing Double Down, always making sure to double down and bet on yourself. That's it for this podcast this week, December 16th. Make sure you guys stay tuned. Make sure you turn those notifications on. We are going to be back next week, December 23rd, for another episode of the Double Down Podcast. We want to thank Taylor and thank WaterWave for the production of this podcast. And that's all we got for episode 13. It's been your boy Parker Fox, and I'm out. Peace.